Another edition of the Heel to the Face podcast is here. Brandon, it's been announced today in the rumor mill that no more WWE house shows, at least until the year 2022, meaning all of 2021 will be house show free. Does that disappoint you at all?
Not really. I'm not that upset about it, but I do feel bad for the younger kids who, those are the things they go to. Those are the things they're excited for. So for them, I'm sad for them. For me, it doesn't affect me as much.
As long as it means that television shows and pay-per-views are going to return to a live audience, because if that means no live audiences for Raw, SmackDown, and pay-per-views until 2022, then 2021 is going to be a very long year. But we'll talk about that and much more as we are talking post-WWE Draft, NXT, AEW, on the road to Hell in a Cell and Halloween Havoc, as this is the Heel to Face podcast, and it starts right now.
So silence your cell phones, hold your applause, and tune into the truth.
Oh, you didn't know? Your ass better call somebody.
Getting beat up by 9 guys in Syracuse, to me, there's not a whole lot of shame in.
From the 315 to the world, this is the Heel to Face podcast.
The cream of the crop! Wow, man, freaked out!
Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Heel to the Face.
I said, are you ready?
From Armory Square in downtown Syracuse, New York, let's send it now to Brandon and Jared.
Bad luck seems to be my middle name. They might as well tag me up with my buddies from Syracuse.
So another edition of the Heel to the Face podcast is on the air. My name is Jared. You can find my partner, as always, Brandon, at Icebreaker21 on Twitter. I am at KRock Jared, but most importantly, follow the show at Heel to the Face and wherever you get the program, whether it be YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, make sure you subscribe so that each week when we post a show, it just shows right up on your notifications so you don't have to come looking for us. And another edition of the Heel to Face podcast is here as we are coming off of a pretty good AEW show where all the championships were on the line. We're coming off the WWE Draft as well. Let's talk WWE Draft. Let's start right there with the WWE Draft. Any big surprises, anything you are looking forward to moving ahead?
I wouldn't say really any big surprises, to be honest with you. I mean, if there was one slight surprise, it was the fact that Andrade wasn't drafted, but that surprise was kind of tempered, really tempered actually, because it was revealed that he is out for a month. He's having elective surgery, so that makes sense why he's not going to get drafted. And we talked about this last week. What I'm looking forward to, going forward post-draft going into Royal Rumble and WrestleMania season is let's see the big dog and Seth Rollins feud. I want to see that soon. I think that will be really good. I'm also looking forward to the potential of Lars Sullivan and Braun Strowman, and that would be really cool as well. So, I mean, we got a lot to digest, and so far I do like some of the moves. It's early. It's a little early to see, what side got the better end of the deal because it's so early. But I'm excited to see this shake-up, and hopefully things for both shows are a lot better than what they have been, because I feel like it's been a little stale lately. That's just me.
I like the Bray Wyatt and the Alexa Bliss move over to Monday Night Raw. I like them obviously moving together. We saw obviously this week the Seth Rollins, Buddy Murphy, Rey Mysterio. That storyline is going to continue probably over on SmackDown. The tag team championships switched hands, if you will. The Street Profits are now the SmackDown tag team champs, and the New Day is now the Raw tag team champs. But in the process, they split up the New Day a little bit. Big E is removed from the group. Do you like this? Because I personally do. I mean, I think some people were a little disappointed. Frankly, I was a big New Day fan in 2016. I remember going to WrestleMania 32. They were actually the host of WrestleMania 32, if I wasn't mistaken. Actually, no, correction. They weren't the host. That was WrestleMania 33. That was the year that they took on the League of Nations. They were the tag team champions. They came out in the big box of cereal, and they didn't put their titles on the line. They took on the League of Nations. Because League of Nations actually got the victory over them. That's why the championships were on the line, led to The Rock, Stone Cold, Shawn Michaels, all them coming down, fighting the League of Nations. But New Day at that time was really, really hot. I remember heading into Roadblock in Toronto. They were really hot going there. WrestleMania, they were probably one of the biggest acts. They had, obviously, like I mentioned just seconds ago, one of the bigger entrances with the big Booty-O's box. And then I want to say WrestleMania 33, they were still pretty hot when they were the host. But since then, I just feel like they've gone down a little bit. Yeah, they had Kofi Kingston last year win the championship at WrestleMania. But I don't think that really attribute. I think the New Day, when Kofi Kingston wasn't the champion, let's say back in 2015, they were hotter then than they were when Kofi won the belt. I think it's time. Big E especially, he had such a great run when he first came into WWE as potential. He reminded me a lot of Batista when there was Deacon Batista, and you're like, when's this guy going to do something on his own instead of just being a lackey? And that's how we felt, remember, with Big E and Dolph Ziggler. When is this guy going to break out and be a solo superstar? Took a bunch of years because he's been with the New Day for so long, but now we get to see what Big E can do.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. That's why, to me, like, a lot of people would say, well, why didn't you talk about the big surprise being the New Day? I wasn't that surprised with the New Day splitting up. That was just me. I had a feeling going into the draft week that was going to happen. I figured it'd be a good time, and I'm not surprised why. The main reason why is simple. Big E is a single star, on the rise, I should say. He's on the rise to being a mega star in the business. I think he has everything going for him. And I think Kofi and Xavier Woods can really do good things on Raw as a tag team. So I think the split was good. And you were a big fan back then. I mean, we were starting recording back in 2017. I can't believe it's almost been 4 years since I've been doing this, but I was a big hater of the New Day, as we all know. And it's funny because when they were on fire is when I least cared for them. And we've talked about it. We can go back to old episodes through the archives, and I didn't like the New Day. Over the last, couple years, I've grown on me a little bit, but it was time. It was time for them to split. And I do think it's time to see Big E really do well. And here's the thing. It's good to see Xavier Woods back, too, because I think Xavier Woods and Kofi Kingston, again, as a tag team and as Raw Tag Team Champions, I think is good for Raw.
Yeah, no, overall, I think the draft was pretty decent. We moved Kevin Owens. We moved some of the women around a little bit, not too much. Other than that, the champions pretty much stayed on the right shows. With the storylines going, do you want to see Roman Reigns? I think between Roman Reigns and Drew McIntyre, in my eyes, Roman Reigns right now is the must-see champion. And if Fox is or SmackDown on Fox is kind of your flagship show, I feel like you got to keep Roman Reigns on SmackDown right now, as hot as that storyline is with him and Jey Uso.
Oh, absolutely. Roman Reigns right now, that's the hottest storyline in the business right now, and that includes AEW, in my opinion. I think having, again, that connection with him and Paul Heyman as the tribal chief, and here's the thing, that's also good for Jey Uso. He's getting the rub he needs, too, because everybody's always looked at Uso, both Usos, as, okay, you guys are just tag team specialists, so when one of you gets injured, you're in trouble. But Jey Uso's gotten that Roman Reigns rub, and I think it's done well for him. Again, we don't see him winning the title against the tribal chief, but I could see him maybe getting a mid-level championship in the future, because he's getting that nice Roman Reigns rub at this point, and I think it's good for business. That's just my opinion on it.
So moving over to NXT this week, we saw that at Halloween Havoc on October the 28th, they're going to return to Spin the Wheel, Make the Deal. Now, if you're not too familiar with what that was back in the Halloween Havoc WCW days in the early 90s, it's a spooky version of Raw Roulette. That's pretty much what it was. If you remember the Raws back in Las Vegas, it's not really much making of a deal. You spin the wheel, and that's the deal. You don't have to make a deal after. It's kind of a dumb name in that regard, because there's no deals to be made. Once you spin the wheel, that's the deal. The deal is that you agree to whatever it lands on, and that's going to be your match. And there's a couple interesting matches, obviously, keep with the Halloween Havoc theme. But that's the next chance for Candice LeRae and Johnny Gargano to win the double championships that they want to, the Women's Championship and the North American Championship. Halloween Havoc, do you see that being the night for Candice LeRae and Johnny Gargano, or do you see Spin the Wheel, Make a Deal, costing them their shot at glory?
At this point, they can't keep losing. I feel like they're losing their steam. So I feel like at this point, don't you feel like they have to get the titles? I feel like this whole Gargano, husband and wife thing, it's losing its luster because they can't come through in the clutch. They're not putting the titles around their waist. So I think this time is a good time for them to do it. And again, we've talked about this on previous title matches involving Damian Priest. And as much as I love Damian Priest, You gotta give Johnny Gargano a title at this point. I mean, he's too valuable. He's too good. And Candice LeRae, having her as a champion would be great. And here's the thing: if Johnny Gargano wins the title against Damian Priest in some sort of crooked fashion, it doesn't make him look bad anyways. If it's some cheap way of Gargano winning, which they've shown that they like to cheat a little bit, I mean, why the heck not? I mean, Damian Priest is on fire. So if he loses the match in a crappy way, in kind of an underhanded tactic, it doesn't hurt Damian Priest. But I think again, you have to give Gargano the belt. You have to give both Garganos the belt. Otherwise, this whole storyline is going to continue to fall flat.
So on AEW this past week, their anniversary show, all the titles were on the line. The tag team titles stayed with FTR in a pretty good opening match. We also saw Cody Rhodes retain the championship in a time limit draw. To be honest with you, watching that match, I watched it earlier today, and Cody Rhodes, Orange Cassidy, a 20-minute draw. That 20 minutes flew by. I don't know if it's just because Orange Cassidy started before the match starts. It's like a 5-minute delay of him just wasting time. But I guess that's a good way to make the match fly by, because by the time they actually started wrestling, I thought they were only halfway through, and to find out they had a minute left was quite surprising. And that match is going to actually have a rematch in a few weeks before Full Gear. In about 2 weeks, those guys are going to square off again, with the winner facing Darby Allin at Full Gear for the TNT Championship. Next week also starts the world title tournament, if you will, as the world title was on the line between Lance Archer and Jon Moxley. A pretty good match. Overall, Jon Moxley obviously retains the championship. Eddie Kingston came out, tried to do a little favoritism, showed that they were bros before eventually turning on him. I bought it for a second because he was really going in on it. During the match, he was speaking to Jim Ross about how, he's a great champion and how they go back a long ways. And then he came out, and it was a good 4 or 5 minutes that he was praising Dean Ambrose, or Jon Moxley, might I say, until the moment came where he decided to turn on him and obviously keep that feud going. Jon Moxley had a very busy week. I mentioned you off air. I watched GCW Bloodsport. Now, I wasn't really familiar with this. This was my first go around with this. It was a pay-per-view on Saturday night. I think it was from Indianapolis, a socially distant crowd, if you will. But Jon Moxley, obviously, that's the one good thing about AEW, is that these people are allowed to work elsewhere. So places like GCW and having these Bloodsport pay-per-views, which they were supposed to, I believe, have this exact one back at WrestleMania weekend. Did not happen. There was supposed to be some people involved back WrestleMania weekend. Unfortunately, those people ended up making it bigger time into AEW and WWE. So some big matches that were kind of supposed to happen at this Bloodsport never panned out because of the future. But Jon Moxley took on a guy, Chris Dickinson. This is like his third Bloodsport. He obviously gets the win, but I think it's really neat to be able to see somebody like Jon Moxley be able to wrestle or fight or do whatever outside of AEW. Do you think that helps, hurts, or doesn't do anything to AEW having their wrestlers wrestle elsewhere?
I think it only helps, because people are going to see, people that maybe follow the Bloodsport maybe don't follow AEW. I don't know.
I don't think so. I think it might be the other way around. People follow AEW, probably don't follow the Bloodsport.
I mean, hey, you never know. I mean, either way, he's getting a rub. I mean, he's gonna give both sides a rub, so to speak, and having the Jon Moxley rub at this point, I think, is a good thing, because, I mean, it's good for business. I think that's why AEW is so popular, not even just because amongst the fans, which we obviously know that's true, but amongst the wrestlers in the business, because you can go out and do whatever the hell you want as long as you are. You hit your dates with AEW, you're free to do whatever you want in the other days, as long as you're, with the COVID and everything, doing it the right way. As long as you're doing things that way, and the thing is, Tony Khan doesn't care. As long as he gets you when he needs you, go ahead and do whatever. If you want to work part-time somewhere else.
I guess it comes from injury, and if you were to get injured doing something outside of the company, puts them in a spot. Obviously, right now they got the storyline with Lance Archer, with Eddie Kingston. He's supposed to face a number one contender, whoever wins this tournament. There's people like Colt Cabana, Hangman Page, Kenny Omega. At Full Gear, let's say right now with the storyline he's going with Eddie Kingston, just coming off the match with Lance Archer, and this tournament starting next week with the finals being at Full Gear. Where do you see Jon Moxley, I guess, his championship reign going? Who do you see him fighting at Full Gear? I probably see him fighting Eddie Kingston. Do you see that storyline ending at Full Gear? Who do you see maybe coming forward as a new number one contender? Kenny Omega, Hangman Page, Sonny Kiss, you know?
Yeah, right. I would say Eddie Kingston for sure, just based on what we've seen recently. I don't think Moxley's losing the title anytime soon. I don't think he's losing the title until 2021, which I know is not that far away. But I still believe he holds on to the title until maybe at least a couple months into 2021. I think we're still a few months out before Mox loses the title. It wouldn't make any sense at this point. I feel like you want to keep the title on him. I keep saying this. Let's have him drop the title in front of fans. I know we had the limited audience, but let's get back to a normal wrestling audience, a normal crowd. That's when you want to have those big moments like that. That's just
this whole normal wrestling crowd thing. I mean, we obviously, when this all started, thought that when things just opened back up again, they would open back up. But the way everything is going, it is just so muddled as to when we're actually going to see an opening of full fans again. And frankly, watching AEW this week, I noticed one thing, and maybe it was just the camera work, but it seems like they had the least amount of fans at Dynamite this week than I ever noticed. I know they had no fans in the 100 level. I don't know if that had to do with the fact that Jon Moxley comes out. Maybe once or twice some of the fans were touching him on his way out to the ring. They're just trying to be extra cautious. But it seemed like they had even less fans. And it seems like, sorry to you, Brandon, and myself a little bit, but I think we can pretty much all but assume 100% there will be no AEW in Rochester on November the 11th. But I think, do you think it's time maybe for AEW to start exploring an exit strategy for Daly's Place? Again, keeping the smaller groups of fans, but maybe leaving Daly's Place. I mean, when do you see them doing this? It just seems like, is there going to be a day, I guess, where we're just opening the floodgates and having fans again? I think football right now is doing a great job, not a great job as in what they're doing, but essentially giving us a barrier about how this is going to work because they're letting fans in, but some are letting them in at different levels. And I feel like by next season, it's going to be 100% for everybody. But It seems like they're going at different rates where some have 60,000, some have 20,000, some have 10,000. And you kind of wonder with wrestling, how are you going to do this? Are you just going – because, I mean, I don't foresee things just completely changing right now. The COVID rates going around the country, they seem to be staying steady. There don't seem to be any great declines. The states that are letting them have it, people are kind of looking back, bad upon, like Florida, that are letting things kind of get out of control. Then you have the team like the Florida Gators over here. Everybody's testing positive for COVID. And people like Nick Saban thinking about coaching from the press box in states that are a little more lax. So you don't see places like New York that, developing the Florida model anytime soon. So do you think that they should start to think about leaving Daly's Place or literally just stay at Daly's Place until this is 100% over? Because the question is it ever going to be 100% over?
Yeah, I do believe it's going to be 100% over. And I mean, we can go on a whole nother topic on that, and we can start our own political show, but that's for another day. My theory is, I would say by the summertime, I believe summer of 2021, which is really not that far away if you think about it. I think we will be back at 100%. I think in the next 6 to 8 months, it'll be 100% again. I do think they're working on a vaccine. I think those things are going to happen. Now, here's the thing. With that being said, Daly's Place is the perfect venue for AEW because it's an indoor-outdoor venue. What I mean by that is it's still covered like you're an indoor, but you have the openings where it's outdoors. It's like an amphitheater kind of deal. You know what I mean? It's a really good setup. So why would you change something it's clearly working? And here's the thing: with all this, you got to have these 6 feet apart and all that stuff. It's even better. They even say it's better to have fresh air, so to speak, coming in because the virus and this and that. I'm not a doctor, but they say if you're more in an outdoor venue and spaced out, it's better than being in an indoor venue and spaced out. I guess is what I'm saying.
I guess my thing with Survivor Series, I'm imagining they're still going to be in the Thunderdome. But I guess the big thing, and it's not even really WrestleMania, but Royal Rumble, I mean, that is literally an event where you have to have all hands on deck when it comes to talent. You have to have at least 30 men 30 women. And a lot of those women and a lot of those men are surprises, or people who haven't been hanging out with the guys, who haven't been hanging out with the girls, the Trish Stratuses and the Michelle McCools and the people who are kind of coming back for the one-offs. And then heading into WrestleMania season, you'd have to also imagine you get some of those part-timers back. You got to have the Brock Lesnar's back. You got to have the Undertaker. Maybe not the Undertaker, but, the same kind of concept. Obviously, they're talking about Roman Reigns versus The Rock. These things not just can't happen in front of no crowds, but they can't even really happen unless, you're allowed to have a lot of wrestlers in one place at one time, kind of thing. Royal Rumble especially. I mean, WrestleMania last year, the way that they shot it was literally just a minimal amount of people per match. They shot each match individually, the minimal amount of people at each match. That's why they didn't even have the tag team championships, essentially. They were fought with, instead of 6 men, with 3 men of 1 member of each team. But heading into the Royal Rumble, I mean, you're going to have 100 wrestlers pretty much in the back all at once, ready to go all together. So having a Royal Rumble without a crowd, trying to get you hyped up for WrestleMania, and having those many and all those wrestlers, that's going to be a tough thing to do. I would love to see how it's going forward. Obviously, I think the thing right now that everybody's inching towards is that WrestleMania will not be in LA this upcoming year. They're going to go back to Raymond James Stadium. But again, my big thing is, I guess, going back to Raymond James Stadium is, if they go, I feel like they've got to go 100%. And the reason I say that is because you already missed out once. You can't come back a second time and be half-assed.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. Here's the thing. I'm hoping that things will be normal even early spring, late winter, which is only a couple months away. I'm hoping that's the case, but, we just don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we just don't know if this virus is going to have a second wave again right around the same time that the first wave hit this year. So everything's up in the air, and it's unfortunate with this whole COVID pandemic. I mean, you are seeing what's happening with LSU and Florida and then Nick Saban. You're seeing those things, but I think once we get this vaccine thing going, and there's good therapeutics and whatnot, then I think you're going to start seeing the floodgates open up again, because then they're going to deem it safe again for people to to venture out, to be in mass crowds. I said 6 to 8 months. I mean, we could be talking of doing this show in this time in 2021, sitting here talking about the same stuff. You know what I mean? So we don't know. My proximity would say 6 to 8 months, I'm thinking, is safe. I would love it for maybe even before the Super Bowl we get things going.
And it's going to be very interesting WrestleMania weekend, regardless, because one thing WrestleMania weekend is WrestleMania weekend is a whole bunch of companies coming together and running shows all weekend long. That's kind of the reason why people travel. It's a bigger thing. It's more than just WWE. So you got to think it's going to be really strange this upcoming WrestleMania, with the fact that they normally have, back-to-back-to-back shows. Obviously, they're going to try to bring back the Hall of Fame. All these other companies are going to try to run shows from there, especially the companies that haven't been running shows this whole time. I mean, independent wrestling companies got to start up again eventually. I mean, that's the lifeblood of the industry. You got to produce new talent, and you can't have this talent just sitting there on the shelf. There's been all sorts of stories I've been reading about talent that, got brought into Evolve and was, on the fast track to WWE. And right now WWE has got Evolve shut down. So some of these people that are in the prime of their careers are doing nothing, and you got to wonder, how long you can do this for. Obviously with baseball, we saw that they shut down the minor leagues this year. But with baseball next year, regardless of if there's fans, you can't shut down the minor leagues again next year in total, because, again, this is your lifeblood. This is where your people are coming from. You can't stop, all these indie wrestling companies from working, because you're literally stopping chances for these people to make it eventually. WWE wrestlers are going to eventually retire, and obviously we've only been doing this for about a year now, maybe less than that, but you got to think that everything has to be going at full speed again sometime, because these people can't just stay on the shelf forever or for extended periods of time in the indies.
Yeah, speaking of indies, I know the 2CW show is like 2 months away, and that's even that's a possibility where that's not going to happen. It could be rescheduled or postponed or whatever at this point. You just don't know with this whole pandemic. It's just one of those things where, unfortunately, we just got to ride the tide, and we all got to stay healthy, and that's why we're doing our shows for the past 7 months now on Skype. So, it's one of those things where we're going with it. We want to get back too. So it's like, as long as we all work together and get this thing under control, and then let's just work together. Whether we all like it or not, or agree with it politically or whatever, let's just get it done. Let's just run the course and let's get back to normal. Because selfishly, I want to get back to sporting events, wrestling events. I want to get back to the whole thing. I know you do too. I know you were at, you've traveled a little bit since, parking lots and things like that, parking garages and things. But we want to get to real arenas and real stadiums soon.
Yes.
I think we all agree on that.
So we're going to finish this week's show with the fact that AEW had their anniversary show this back week, celebrating 1 year of AEW Dynamite since it debuted. I think it's a little bit over a year. I think it was like October the 11th was their first show. It was either October 2nd. You're right. It was October 2nd. I think October 11th, because I'm giving AEW some credit here for thinking that their anniversary show ran closer to the time that it was the 1 year anniversary, when technically it should have been about 2 weeks ago that they ran their anniversary show. But we're talking about some moments. What are some moments from AEW Dynamite in their first year that really stuck out to you, that you really enjoyed? It's been tough for Dynamite. I mean, literally more than half of your year was in front of no crowd. That's a tough way to start a company.
Yeah, it's a very tough way. And luckily they have the great backing of the Khan family, and they got the great TV contract with Turner. So luckily they have that. So, I mean, to give you a moment, I got one in particular. I would have to do the debut of FTR when they pulled up in the classic truck, the old pickup truck. I thought that was cool. I thought that, to me, that was my favorite moment for Dynamite purposes. I mean, there's been a ton of great matches. I mean, MJF's had so many great promos. His promos have been fantastic. We were talking before we were recording, and we're talking about, okay, which, MJF promo. It's like, okay, well, which one? Because there's been so many great MJF moments. There's Orange Cassidy's been he's been awesome. I didn't follow Orange Cassidy before AEW, but I got to tell you, I think he is one of those rising stars in the business. I think what he did, especially going back to Dynamite this week with Cody Rhodes, it worked. It was, to me, I think it was arguably the best match of the week at all brands, all shows. I thought that was a great match. So overall, FTR was my favorite moment, them debuting. How about you?
I got to kick it back to just a few weeks before they didn't have a crowd. It was in February. Cody Rhodes, Wardlow, in the cage match, the first cage match in AEW. Cody Rhodes with the springboard off of the top of the cage. I mean, that image right there, I think, really solidified AEW in like what it can be for the fans. How it was definitely a show that I was looking forward to when it came to the area going to. And it sucks. One of the top moments for a lot of people, actually, was the show that we were supposed to be at. The debut show of Brody Lee and Matt Hardy on March the 18th ended up happening. That was their first show of this slew of shows at Daly's Place. But there's been some other great matches, Kenny Omega and Pac in a 30-minute Iron Man match. I thought, John Moxley, a few of his title defensive have been pretty good. And I think one moment that I was reading about earlier today that you can't forget about that happened prior to this, leading up to you just speaking about MJF and Cody. And when MJF just took it to Cody because, he couldn't put his hands on him to still have the match, and he just got welted up like something we haven't seen in a long time on Dynamite.
Yeah, no, and actually, one other thing, I want to not to jump off AEW, but there's one thing I got to talk to you about. I don't know if you've seen it, maybe you have, but PWI released their top 100 female wrestlers, and big surprise, the top 5 females, all WWE. I'm going to give you a second. Name the 5 WWE female superstars that made PWI's top 5 out of the top 100.
So I didn't see the list, so I'm going to have to – this one's going to be tough because I feel like obviously, you don't have Becky Lynch there. You obviously don't have Ronda Rousey there because they weren't around for most of the year, I would assume. But maybe I'm wrong. I'm going to say number one. I'm going to say you have to give it to Bayley. Sasha Banks is probably in there. And I'm going to say Rhea Ripley's in there as well. What do you got for me?
You got 2 out of 5. So the top 5 goes like this. You were correct with number 1, and I would have said that too. Bayley is definitely number 1. Becky Lynch was number 2.
All right.
Asuka was number 3. Charlotte Flair was 4, and then you were right with Sasha Banks being there. Sasha was 5. Now there is one. Actually, you did say 1. I'm going to say one other female that I am very surprised that is not on this list is Io Shirai. I think Io Shirai has been one of the best. I would take Becky Lynch out at this point and put Io in there.
I would take Io Shirai, and I guess here's the issue I guess I'm having, and maybe this is why I'm understanding a little bit different, but it's probably, if it's the last year, it's probably the last year from today 1 year ago, and I guess you could definitely put Becky Lynch on there, because going back a year from SummerSlam to SummerSlam, yeah, she was there for a good 7 of those months leading up to WrestleMania this year. And Rhea Ripley, it took her a little bit to get things going. She's gotten things going, I guess, a little more recently. But yeah, it's very surprising the top 5 has all WWE superstars, because in the men's, it was Jon Moxley of AEW who came in number 1 there. So very surprising that they picked all WWE women, which I guess is good for WWE. And it's good for, I guess here's the thing. It's good for WWE, but it's also good for AEW, because AEW is under the impression that they have some of the better talent when it comes to the wrestling ring. So the fact that they have all of this talent, and I guess it hasn't peaked yet, is a good thing for AEW. The fact that WWE has the Baileys of the world, number 1, really, where can they go? I mean, we've already seen a lot of these guys in Hell in a Cell matches and Iron Man matches. We're going to see Bayley and Sasha Banks in Hell in a Cell in a couple of weeks. But so for AEW, it gives them a lot of chances to say, where can we go from here with our women's wrestlers? Because they feel right now, and arguably so, that they have probably some of the better women's wrestlers, less of these sports entertainers, as Eddie Kingston likes to call it, the land of the entertainers. So it really gives them more of the sky's the limit with them. It's hard when you have Kenny Omegas of the world who are already number 1, because it's hard to top 5 stars.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. I mean, I agree with you. I'm surprised that there wasn't even one AEW female on there. If I was going to pick anybody, actually, I would probably, there's 2 names I would think of that maybe AEW could have slid in there in the top 5, and that's arguable, is Sheeta, and I think Britt Baker, Dr. Britt Baker, DMD. I think she could arguably be in it, even though she hasn't wrestled very much recently. I think those 2 could argue. It's, to me, I think overall, I think PWI messed this one up, and at least it wasn't a Meltzer list. I mean, it would have been all AEW or New Japan Wrestling, competitors at this point. So I do have to disagree with PWI.
I imagine in the list, there's obviously lots of New Japan and AEW,
but
of
course,
just talking.
We're just highlighting
the top 5.
For me, we could argue the top 5 all day long. I do believe Bayley has been the best female competitor this year. I mean, she's been a champion for about a year now anyways, so that's fine. My problem is, again, why isn't Io Shirai in there? Io Shirai, to me, has had a fantastic year. I think if you pull the wrestlers, whether it's AEW, New Japan, WWE, you name all the big brands, I bet you majority say Io Shirai is the best, because I think she is the AJ Styles of women's wrestling. She has the lucha style. She's got the Japanese style. She's got all these hybrid moves. She just learns it all, and she's a martial artist. So for me, Io Shirai should be on the top 5. I know she's on the list. If she's not in the top 100, PWI should go out of business. Let's just be honest. But Io Shirai should be a top 5 player.
The women, to me, their top 100 is a lot like the Women's Royal Rumble, and that is, you only have so many to choose from. I think literally probably everyone on the WWE roster is probably, and the AEW roster are probably on the list. I mean, we obviously saw with the Royal Rumble, if they needed to make a 30-women Royal Rumble, at least they could maybe now, but obviously the first couple of years we saw the Royal Rumble, it was very Legends heavy, trying to, because of the number of people in there. So I'm guessing Io Shirai is definitely on the list, no doubt about it. I mean, it's 100 women, and it'd be hard.
You have to, you would assume. I mean, Rhea Ripley would be on there as well. I do see, I'm looking at the list right here. It looks like, so we got Bayley, So I'll give you the final stuff. Oh, Shida was 6. I just pulled this up. I'm looking out on my phone. Shida was 6, so I wasn't too far off on Shida. Tessa Blanchard was 7. Riho was 8. Io Shirai falls to 9, which I disagree with. She should be up higher. And I don't know this competitor. Maybe you will. Mayu Iwatani. I'm not familiar with her work, but I mean, she's obviously pretty good if she's in the top 10. And then I'll throw one more in there. Rhea Ripley fell to 11.
All right. It's going to be very interesting to see where Tessa Blanchard, obviously, where she is on this list. I mean, she could have probably been number 1 easily if she would have had a better finish to the year.
For sure.
And I guess my thing is, now that you mentioned Tessa Blanchard, it's hard to think that she wasn't in the top 5, knowing that at one time this year in January, she was a world heavyweight champion, man or woman. So pretty tough that she's not in the top 5 with one of the greatest accomplishments in women's wrestling in the pretty near recent past.
Yeah.
But I got some homework for you ending this week's show. Hell in a Cell we're coming up on. So the question I have for you that we want to answer next week is, give us some of your favorite Hell in a Cell matches, or at least your favorite Hell in a Cell match, not counting anything before the year 2000. You're not going to skip out on 98. I mean, that's why we can't do it. It's not homework.
Which match are we both talking about? Which match before 2000 do we think we're both talking about here? That we're not
King of 98, obviously.
If you got that right. So, okay, I'm fine with 2000.
Or even Bad Blood 97, the original Hell in a Cell match. And I'll even say this much. It's got to be past the year 2000.
Okay.
There was 2 good matches in the year 2000, Cactus Jack and Triple H, which is a classic, where Cactus Jack went through the cell. And then the end of 2000, which was the 6-man, match with Rikishi, Kurt Angle, Stone Cold, The Rock, the 6-man elimination Hell in a Cell match at Armageddon. So it's got to be past 2000, 2001 to today. Give us something in those 19 years of time that you think was pretty good when it comes to Hell in a Cell. You got a lot to choose from. But I feel like the first couple of years were just some of the best, and they're just too easy of answers.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think you're making it tough on me because obviously you know where I'm going. 98, of course. 97's good as well.
It's just not. Yeah, I mean, it'd be like saying, "Oh, we're gonna. I want to know who do you think the best NBA player of all time is?" I wouldn't think. Would it be a waste if I let Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and those people on the list? Well, it would be a waste of time. If I said outside of those 2 people, then we could have a discussion, because then all of a sudden things get interesting, and that's what we want to keep around here, things interesting.
Of course.
So next week, Hell in a Cell, your favorite matches, or your favorite match between the year 2001 to 2020, where we currently are, as we head into Hell in a Cell next week. We'll talk all about that in next week's edition of Heel to Face Podcast. For this week's edition, I'm Jared Wicks. For Brandon Clements, make sure to follow the show at Heel to the Face. We will talk to you guys next week.